Hi, I'm Marco, and I will be ranting about why Marvel and DC suck nowadays. Remember when there was a time when DC ruled and Marvel struggled? In the early 2000s, DC was flourishing with Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises weren't just superhero movies, they were serious cinema that redefined an entire genre. Meanwhile, Marvel was desperate, selling Spider-Man to Sony and the X-Men to Fox just to stay afloat. They were out of options. Then in 2008, Iron Man changed everything. Robert Downey, a risky casting choice, injected life into Tony Stark, and that now famous Nick Fury scene about the Avengers initiative quietly set off a cultural earthquake. Marvel grew carefully. Thor, Captain America, the first Avenger, the Avengers, each movie building trust, building emotional investment. The magic was that back then, the movies were the subject, not the actors. Most of the early MCU actors weren't massive global superstars yet. The story came first, and the fame came afterward. Meanwhile, DC rushed to catch up. Instead of patiently introducing audiences to Superman in a real way, they jumped straight to Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, cramming in Wonder Woman, teasing Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg without giving any of them their own breathing room. It was like trying to force a plant to grow by yelling at it. Worse, DC abandoned what made them special. Nolan had shown the power of the story, but instead of deepening it, DC executives decided they needed to be funny, like Marvel. But here's the thing, DC already had humor. It just wasn't cute. DC's humor was darker, sharper, tragic. Batman's grim sarcasm, Constantine's dry cynicism, Joker's chilling ironies. Even Flash had a sense of humor, but it was grounded in survival, not sitcom quips. DC's humor was like Shakespearean tragedy, not Saturday morning cartoons. But executives didn't trust that tone. Instead, they stapled on awkward jokes into movies like Justice League, trying to force Marvel-style banter into worlds built on myth and melancholy. Suddenly, Batman was making jokes about liking Superman. Flash was bumbling like a second-rate Spider-Man. Compare that to Christian Bale's Batman, who barely smiled, who carried his pain like armor, and you realize how far they fell. Marvel's humor worked because Tony Stark was built for it. DC's humor felt artificial because it was afraid of its own greatness. After Endgame, Marvel's cracks started showing. Instead of carefully building new sagas, they began flooding the market with Disney Plus shows and mid-tier movies. Worse, Marvel's movie structure started to feel copy-paste. Act 1 quirky origin, Act 2 colorful fight, Act 3 CGI villain showdown. It worked for a while because Marvel cleverly disguised the repetition under new cultural skins. Black Panther introduced African futurism. Shang-Chi brought Chinese mythology and martial arts. Ms. Marvel explored Pakistani-American life. Fresh visuals, fresh cultures, but underneath, the same predictable arc. And after a while, even beautiful skins couldn't cover the cracks. Worse still, Marvel in Phase 4 made a fatal mistake. They tried to force the Disney Plus series into the cinematic universe. To understand Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, you were expected to watch WandaVision. To follow Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, you needed to know Loki. Casual moviegoers, people who built the MCU's success in the first place, felt alienated. The movies no longer stood on their own. Instead of excitement, viewers felt lost. Instead of expanding the audience, Marvel fractured it. It was content overload, not storytelling evolution. And the result? Collapse of attention. Audiences stopped caring. Box office numbers fell. Only exceptions like Spider-Man, No Way Home with its emotional nostalgia, and Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness with Sam Raimi's horror flair, stood out. Everything else? Blur, disposable, forgotten. And now, desperate to cover the cracks, Marvel is stuffing movies with famous superstars instead of great characters. They're chasing names instead of chasing meaning. Massive celebrity cameos, multiversal variants just to get big headlines, and rumors of even resurrecting Robert Downey Jr., cheapening one of the most emotional endings Marvel ever achieved. It feels less like myth building and more like a soap opera where no one stays dead. Compare that to the early MCU where the movie itself was the hero, and you'll see just how much heart Marvel has lost. Meanwhile, DC floundered even worse. They kept rushing. Suicide Squad tried to introduce 10 villains in 2 hours. Birds of Prey pivoted to Harley Quinn chaos with no real spine. Wonder Woman 1984 abandoned myth and elegance for cartoonish wish fulfillment. DC stopped trusting its darkness, and in doing so, lost its identity completely. Beneath both Marvel and DC's decline is the same ugly truth: corporate greed. Marvel and DC are no longer storytelling studios, they're content farms. Superman isn't a myth, he's a product line. Spider-Man isn't a coming-of-age symbol anymore, he's a merchandise empire. Story decisions aren't driven by heart anymore, they're driven by quarterly reports. Studios aren't asking, what story do we need to tell? They're asking, what content can fill this release slot? That's why Marvel greenlit shows like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion with no real emotional core. That's why Warner Bros. Forced a Frankenstein Justice League movie at 2 hours flat, no matter how broken it felt. And when you stop telling real stories, you lose real stakes. Death and endings used to matter. The death of Superman rocked the world. Infinity Gauntlet meant permanent consequences. Now, characters die and come back in the same movie. Loki dies? Multiverse. Loki appears. Iron Man dies? Multiverse Iron Man rumors. If endings are meaningless, stories are meaningless. Heroes don't feel heroic anymore. They feel replaceable. Audiences aren't tired of superheroes. They're tired of fake consequences. And then came trend chasing. Instead of shaping culture, Marvel and DC started chasing it. Instead of creating legends, they started creating diverse variants like they were ticking marketing checkboxes. True diversity, true innovation, comes from storytelling that's lived, loved, and believed in. Not announcements at Comic-Con, compared to T'Challa's natural rise in Civil War and Black Panther to the hollow, box-checking feeling of some recent projects. One was mythology, the other was marketing. Meanwhile, the comics themselves bent toward Hollywood's shadow. Tony Stark in the comics became a snark machine to match RDJ Nick Fury was retconned into Samuel L. Jackson's version. Batman comics changed tone depending on whatever the movies were doing. Instead of Hollywood being inspired by decades of comics, comics were becoming cheap movie merchandise. The tail wagged the dog. Mythology shrank to fit screenplays. But here's the thing. It's not too late. Marvel and DC can rebuild. They can slow down. Stop chasing universes and start telling myths again. Let characters die when it matters. Let endings mean something. Build worlds through patience, not marketing calendars. Imagine if DC built its universe by giving every Batman villain a deep, serious, standalone movie. Joker, Riddler, Mr. Freeze, Penguin. Let Gotham rot on screen first, then let Batman rise from the ashes naturally. Imagine if Justice League members earned their place not through boardroom decisions, but real emotional arcs. Imagine if Marvel focused not on making 10 shows a year, but one unforgettable movie every 2 years. Imagine if both trusted the power of myth again, not the power of content. Heroes are meant to save us, not just sell us. And their myths are still worth saving, if only someone is brave enough to believe again. I'm Marco, and that's the ranting corner of the Geek universe.